Guardians, listen up. Ever feel like you're navigating a galaxy of information when it comes to Space Force doctrine? Well, today we're diving headfirst into a doc that's basically your roadmap to space superiority. Space Doctrine Publication 3100.
We're focusing on Chapter 4, which is all about Space Domain Awareness, or SDA.
SDA. It's more than just knowing there's stuff up there, right?
Way more. It's about understanding the space environment just like you understand the battle space here on Earth. Who are the players, what are their capabilities, and what are they trying to do?
Okay, so it's like knowing the difference between just seeing cars on the road versus like understanding traffic patterns and driver behavior.
Perfect analogy. We're not just cataloging satellites. We need to be able to anticipate threats, predict maneuvers, and protect our own assets up there.
And those assets are critical for everything from navigation to communication to intelligence gathering, right? So where do we even begin to get a handle on all this?
Well, SDP 3100 lays out a pretty clear chain of responsibility, starting with Space Operations Command, better known as SPOC. Think of them as the eyes and ears of our space operations.
So they're the ones constantly scanning the skies, keeping tabs on everything in orbit.
Absolutely. They've got this incredible network of sensors, everything from radar and optical telescopes to systems that can even detect, get this, nuclear detonations in space.
Seriously. That's some next-level stuff.
It is, and it highlights just how important SDA is. And remember, SPOC isn't just passively observing. They use this data to actively monitor for any threats to our space assets.
Threats like what? What are we talking about here?
Well, it could be anything from an adversary maneuvering a satellite too close to one of ours to the possibility of an anti-satellite weapon test.
Okay, now that you mention it, I remember reading about those ASAT tests in the news. Scary stuff.
They are a real concern, and that's why SDA is so vital. The earlier we can detect and understand these kinds of threats, the better prepared we are to respond effectively.
It's about staying ahead of the curve.
Right.
Anticipating those moves before they even happen.
Exactly. But here's the thing, SDA isn't a one-man show. It requires a ton of coordination, not just within the Space Force, but across the entire military.
So who's bringing all the pieces together, making sure everyone's on the same page?
That's where U.S. Spacecom, or U.S. Space Command, comes in. If SPOC is gathering the intel, U.S. Spacecom is analyzing it, putting it into context, and coordinating the response.
So they're like the conductors of this giant space orchestra.
I like that. But even the best orchestra needs to share its music, right? And that brings us to a really important part of SDA that SDP 3100 emphasizes: data sharing.
Okay, so we're talking about sharing information of what we're seeing in space, but with who? And more importantly, why?
Well, think of it like navigating a busy city during rush hour.
Okay, I'm already stressed just thinking about that.
Right, you've got your GPS, but what if you could also tap into traffic cameras, real-time accident reports, even the routes other drivers are taking?
You're saying that sharing data is like having a superpower when it comes to SDA, giving us a much clearer picture of what's happening up there.
Exactly, and that's what we're going to dig into next.
So if we're sharing this data, who are we sharing it with? Is it just our allies, or are we talking about a free-for-all with, like, everyone?
Well, 3100 is pretty clear about prioritizing data sharing with allies and partners. These are the countries that, share our interest in a peaceful and stable space environment. But it also recognizes that there are times when sharing limited data, even with competitors, could be beneficial.
Wait, really? Why would we ever share intel with our rivals?
Think about it this way. Let's say there's a piece of space debris on a collision course with a commercial satellite.
Okay, Andel.
Well, that debris could be from anyone, right? It might be in everyone's best interest to share tracking information in that scenario to, prevent a catastrophic event that could create even more debris.
So it's like sometimes even rivals have to work together to avoid a bigger mess.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that space is a shared domain and certain situations call for a more, how should I put it, a more pragmatic approach.
Pragmatic, right? So it's less about picking sides and more about avoiding a cosmic fender bender.
You got it. And speaking of data, SDP 3100 also mentions this thing called the Unified Data Library, or UDL. Have you heard of this?
It rings a bell, but refresh my memory. What exactly is the UDL?
Well, it's basically a centralized hub for all things SDA. Imagine a giant, secure, cloud-based platform where all of our space situational awareness data is compiled, processed, and analyzed.
All of it. We're talking data from our own sensors, from our allies, even commercial partners, right?
Yep, the whole 9 yards. It's all about connecting the dots, turning raw data into actionable intelligence.
This sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. Like
Hmm.
we're watching a giant holographic map with like little blips of light representing every satellite and piece of space junk whizzing around.
You're not far off. It's all about creating a comprehensive picture of the space domain so we can, make informed decisions.
Decisions about everything from maneuvering our own satellites to assessing potential threats. Okay, this is all starting to come together now. But, while we're laser focused on everything orbiting Earth, SDP-3100 also makes it clear that we need to start thinking bigger, as in cislunar space bigger,
That's right. Cislunar space, the region between Earth and the Moon, is becoming increasingly strategically important.
and therefore a potential new chessboard. Right. But why is SDA such a big deal out there? I mean, it's not exactly teeming with satellites, is it?
Not yet, but it will be. And it's not just about the number of objects. Cislunar space presents unique challenges for SDA. For example, think about the distances involved.
Okay, it's way farther out than GEO, but what else?
Well, for starters, the gravitational dynamics in cislunar space are completely different from Earth's orbit. So predicting trajectories and, identifying potential close approaches, it becomes way more complex.
So it's like trying to track a fly buzzing around in a hurricane.
Pretty much. And that's why 3100 calls for new and advanced sensor technologies specifically designed for the cislunar environment. We're talking sensors that can operate at these vast distances.
And cope with the crazy gravitational forces, I imagine.
Exactly. Sensors that can provide more detailed information about the objects they're tracking.
So it's not just about seeing farther, it's about seeing clearly in a much more complex environment.
Exactly. And that brings us to another challenge highlighted in SDP 3100, the potential for adversaries to, exploit these complexities to their advantage.
Meaning it's easier to hide in cislunar space. Like if we're having trouble tracking things out there, couldn't someone just slip under the radar, so to speak?
It's a real concern, and that's why 3100 stresses the importance of, let me see, space intelligence fusion, they call it.
Space intelligence fusion. Okay, now you're just using big words to sound smart. Break that down for me.
Basically, it means we can't rely solely on those fancy new sensors we talked about. We need to bring together information from every source imaginable.
So we're talking signals intelligence, like intercepting communications.
Absolutely. And cyber intelligence,
Mm.
tracking activity in the digital domain, even open source intelligence.
Open source. You mean like reading news articles and monitoring social media?
Hey, you never know what kind of valuable intel you might find out there. The point is, the more pieces of the puzzle we have, the harder it is for someone to hide their true intentions.
So it's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture.
Precisely. And that brings us back to something we touched on earlier. SDA isn't just about playing defense, it's about ensuring our own freedom of action in space.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. If we want to operate freely in cislunar space, say to build a lunar base or send missions further out, we need to know what's going on around us.
Exactly. We need to be able to identify and assess any potential threats to those operations and, respond accordingly.
It's like we're playing a cosmic game of chess, and SDA is how we stay one step ahead.
That's a great way to put it. SDA is about understanding the board, the players, and the stakes so we can make those strategic decisions that ensure a secure and prosperous future for everyone.
And maybe even avoid a space-based checkmate. Well, Guardians, that's a wrap on our deep dive into space domain awareness in SDP-3100. Remember, this document is your guide to navigating this increasingly complex and contested domain. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and keep reaching for the stars.